Well, it's another blazing hot day here at DD HQ, and we are continuing to work on the F12. We've got both of the cool bosses running at extra high speed to try to cool us down in here. It's like, I don't know, 100 degrees inside the shop, but if you're close enough to one of those fans, it's not too bad. But yeah, just been making some more progress on the F12. We were able to get all those fittings, so I have that pile of stuff behind me that we're working on currently. Already welded a few things up. Let me show you guys what we have going on. We got a couple fittings for the turbo water line. So we've got the banjo fitting here, so that's gonna come straight down. And we have, well, actually, that one's off right now because Tim's actually assembling the lines for that. I pulled the front cover off again and welded on another fitting, a -6 that points down with the T fitting on it. So we basically, water comes down and then tees off and we'll go to both the turbos. That is right there. So now we have that spot ready for the, that one is the hot side. So I have that fitting that we were working on last time. We cut it up and machine it down nice and flat, and I just welded the -6 AN fitting on that guy. So that's gonna go into the block, and then another line is gonna come out of there, go to another T fitting, and that'll be on the other side of the turbo, so we can get the water in and out of there. Lots of little details. I had to machine the fittings down a little bit. Actually, the banjos were a couple millimeters too long to actually get onto the turbos because of the way we made the brackets. So it is a very tight clearance right here, and I didn't want to really grind this down because we've already windowed it, mostly just for looks. Obviously save a tiny little bit of weight, but now if I was to grind that piece out, I'd basically take the whole rib off the side, and then it wouldn't be that strong. So instead of redesigning that whole piece, I was able to just cut the banjo down a couple millimeters and get it to just swing in there to tighten on. That's the kind of things that just take a long time that, you know, you could think about it, but until you have the fittings on hand and you figure everything out, you start making brackets to hold the turbos, you build a whole exhaust around it, and then you run into a little issue like that. So a little bit of problem solving that always adds some time. But after doing this for so long, you get kind of used to it. You kind of know, like, all right, it should take me about 3 or 4 hours to do all the plumbing for the water lines, welding the fittings, all that. But I'm gonna give myself 6 because you're always gonna run into little issues. Like welding on the front cover. The front cover is cast aluminum and it's not new. So it's been soaking up all these, you know, bits of dirt and all these, I don't know, contaminants, basically some coolant stuff. So grinding it down, sanding it, and then torching it, scrubbing it with a wire brush, trying to get everything out before you weld it so you don't get that porosity in the welds. Like all these little bits of dirt that come out that basically make like these pinholes for water or whatever it might be wherever you're welding it to get out and start leaking. But it looks pretty good. I think it's solid. Move on to the next thing. We were able to make some more progress, and I think we finally come to the point where I've ordered every single fitting and piece of line that we need except for the brake line. So the brake lines I'm just gonna have made at a local place. They do crimp style. It's just, well, brake pressures are really high, sometimes up to 2,000 PSI. And those fittings I know are gonna be assembled properly, and then I don't have to worry about, did I assemble it perfectly? Did the little acorn nut get smashed properly? Did it get really good seal? Because if one of those lines pops off, you're gonna basically lose brakes, and that's not good. So other than that, everything seems to be accounted for. We got all the water lines figured out. We got the oil lines figured out. Everything's looking really good. And we're starting to work on the breather lines, got all those fittings done. So we've got, coming out of the valve cover here, we've got 2 ports. So I think we're gonna run the lines like this and have them loop back. So we'll just put a clamp here, and then these will basically make a U-turn, come down here, and then we're gonna put a Y in the valley. So it'll be 2 -8s going to a single -10, and then it'll run over here and come into the catch tank. On top of the, or actually on the dry sump tank, we're gonna run a hose from here into the catch tank as well. And then I think we're just gonna plug this hole up here, because I believe that the valve covers used to go into that lower spot on the dry sump tank. And then the upper one went into the intake system to basically draw any oil vapors out and get it into the combustion chamber and burn it. But we don't have to worry about that. This is a race car, all that's emission stuff. So this is gonna be a vented to atmosphere system. We're not gonna have any crankcase pressure really. If we do, it's gonna be vented out. So we shouldn't see any positive pressure inside of the crankcase. We'll know if the engine is not sealing well by the amount of blow-by we're getting out of the catch tank. But I hope it works because, like I said, trying to find those diagrams for the Ferrari and how everything is routed is really difficult. But that's what makes the most sense. From other dry sump systems that I've put in race cars before, that looks like how it's put in there. And I can kind of see where the fittings go inside of the tank. The one on top is just all the way up. It's basically just a vent. It's the point where there's the least amount of oil because it's the highest point. So yeah, I think we'll just plug that one up. Everything else should be good. So I ordered some more fittings that are gonna come tomorrow or Monday to finish all this stuff up. But we got the critical stuff done on the front of the engine. So when we have to take the engine out, at least we're not like hoping that we got it right. I know where we have everything. Everything's been cut. We actually cut the hoses for the water lines and the turbos. We had to go with like a 45-degree angle there to get it to clear this plug. So it fits really tight on the side there. That's just the way the banjo fits. So these are gonna come down here to a T that's already here. That guy's gonna go right there as well. Both these lines will come in it. This line goes into that one on the side of the block that I welded up. So that's our water line over there. Everything's looking pretty good.
Yo, Tim, you can't do that here. You're gonna ruin the interior, bro.
No, this isn't the bad thing that you think it is.
What is that?
It's just flavored air from our sponsor today, Fume. The flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking. It's a whole new movement towards better habits led by Fume. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. Fume draws flavor to your mouth. Fume fills the void ditching a bad habit can leave. And Fume is not a vape. There's no vapors, no nicotine. It's a guilt-free alternative and no batteries that you'll ever have to charge.
Tim, are you vaping in Dave's car? What are you doing?
This is just flavored air. If flavored air was compared to vaping, vaping would be like a sticky soda. This is like herbal tea. And the Fume looks awesome. Weighted really nice. It's made to fidget with a bunch of magnets and a bunch of snapping and clicking. Fume ASMR. It calms your anxiety. Fume has lots of delicious flavors to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. This is my favorite right here, the orange vanilla. Flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronic vapors or combustion. Citrusy. Fume continuously invests in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products, as well as they're backed by US-based doctors. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you could be the next success story. For the limited time, you can use my code DAILYDRIVEN to get your free topper. It's a perfect accessory to your Fume device. Slip it onto the mouthpiece for a softer, warmer feel. It's chewable for those who love to fidget, and it's reusable. Head to tryfume.com, that's tryfum.com, and use code DAILYDRIVEN, or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today.
We got the radiator in, we got the radiator coolant tank in, and we started figuring out the fill lines and the vent lines there. So we have the dash 10 fill here that's going to the radium expansion tank. This is the dash 4 breather line that comes from the front of the engine, and that's going to basically go over here. There's going to be a T fitting, so we're going to have another dash 4 there going into the T, that line, and then going over there to the highest point in the car to make sure that all the air is out of the system constantly. It's always circulating the water, and it's always letting any air bubbles come out all the way to the top. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm working on the next project that needs to get started because I have to send this file out to someone to machine some parts out of steel. Probably 4130, 41 something, some type of chromoly that's gonna be strong enough because it's an axle adapter. So for now, I want to try to use the F12 original axles because we're using all of the F12 rear suspension. It's a really good design. It's already on the car. The subframe and everything is there. Obviously it fits. The axles are very strong as well. So we'll give it a shot. And if we do have issues and we're breaking axles, then we'll go and spend the $3,000–$4,000 to get a set of custom axles made. But that means we have to have spares. So $3 or $4 grand for the first set, another $3 or $4 grand for the second set. It's a lot of money. So if I can avoid having to do that for now, at least, we can get the car on the dyno and start testing it. We'll buy a couple spare axles because they're actually not that bad. I've seen them on eBay for about $500, $600, $700 a piece. So in the grand scheme of things, relatively cheap. But now I'm trying to measure everything out, and it's a little bit more complex than just the 2 bolt patterns because the axle is actually 106. Yeah, it's 106 millimeters across, and the quick change diff that we put in the car is 104 millimeters. So we can't do a straight bolt, which I wouldn't want to do anyway, because we need about 37 millimeters of spacing to get the axles to work. So the factory transmission was whatever 37.5 is, doubled wider. So figured out what the width difference is, cut that in half, 37.5. Now we need to make a spacer that goes in there. So I'm starting to draw that up. It's gonna be, like I said, kind of complex because we have to do some pocketing, some dish stuff, and also some recesses for the bolts, because we're gonna have to have this adapter bolt on to the side of that stub axle, basically coming out of the quick change diff. Those will bolt on first, and then the axle will go in place and get the other bolts. Now the reason I wouldn't want to run a long bolt all the way through is the longer the bolt is, the more chance it's going to twist and snap those bolts off. So we're going to run shorter bolts that adapt it, and then shorter bolts that basically bolt the axle on. So here's what we're working on right now. So I've got both of the bolt patterns here. This hole is smaller because this hole is going to have to get tapped for a 10 millimeter by 1.5 bolt. These are just 10 millimeters straight through, where the bolts are just going to go right through, and then I'll have to build that recess into there. But I got to draw it up, and then I have to it's called extrude it. So you basically make it flat, and then you tell it how thick you want it to be, and then I can go in and do it in layers. So do the first layer, and then add a second layer with some pockets and some recesses and all that. It's going to take a while to draw it up, and I'm not that proficient at doing these types of drawings. 2D drawings, simple flat sheets, I can get that done super fast. But this is a bit more complicated, and it's something that I don't usually do because I don't really machine anything. I have a mill, but I might flatten something out, but I'm not going to get really carried away with all the pocketing and all that kind of stuff. Just send it out to somebody else to do it. But so far, everything's coming along, and you know, one step at a time. Try to focus on all of these different things that need to get done on the car. I got this list that I just keep jotting down, checking things off and adding things to the list. But like I said, at this point, when you get to the car build, when it's nearing completion, it's all the little details that you just have to go through step by step.
So today the Senna is getting the windshield replaced finally after this giant crack on the windshield just from vibration. And these guys got to figure out how to get this out, because the clamshell in the front does not open. So they're going to try to just move the windshield out of the way and find a way to basically cut the windshield out. But hopefully it's pretty simple and nothing breaks. Have you guys done one of these before?
Sure.
Really?
Yeah, we've done a couple of McLarens.
Oh, really? Have you guys done a Senna though?
720s, just one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's gonna be the second one.
It's not too bad, is it?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Got it.
Más abajo.
Is this the first cut?
It's the first cut.
It seems pretty simple. Kind of.
Kind of.
So they got the whole driver's side cut already, and now they're about to probe under the windshield to see if they could break the seal.
All right, so typically you remove the wire with knife, cutting, old method.
Yep, or
This
the
is
metal.
piano wire they use on sample cars.
Yeah.
Since this car is a carbon fiber,
Right.
We're gonna use different type of wire where just to prevent damage to the carbon fiber.
So it's a little bit softer, but it'll
It's
still cut the
softer,
glue.
and you will never damage the carbon fiber with this.
Oh,
With
perfect.
this you do, but not with this.
Oh, so
Right?
but do you still have to use this to push that through, or how do you get that string through?
Oh, so we use this needle.
Yeah.
We're gonna pass it through. You will see it. in
Okay,
a minute.
cool. So they got the string through the windshield. I had to run real quick, so I couldn't film it, but they pushed it through very carefully. And now the string is through, and they're about to cut the windshield right now. Looks like they're all ready to go, Mike.
Yeah, they are using the correct tools too. Like, obviously, this is a very, very expensive car, and it's all carbon. So on a normal car, you open the hood, you pull the windshield wipers off, but there is no hood on this car. It's this little.
Yeah, it's all
hatch
one piece.
right
Like,
here.
I don't even know how you would unbolt this front clamshell.
Yeah, it's multiple pieces, but I think you'd have to take this piece off. No, you might have to take this off first to get that off. But anyway,
That doesn't.
that's a lot of work, and yeah, these cars are put together with these little tiny clips that are like one-time use. Plus, it's carbon. There's always a chance of like break this thing, so better to just not take it apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, these guys have the right tool. So basically,
Oh, it's moving.
it's a super strong string,
Yeah.
and they wrap it around. They poke a hole, and they get the string inside, and then yeah, they just use that tool. It's like basically like a fishing reel, and it just shrinks around and pulls the string, and it cuts the rubber seal while they do it. So that will be able to remove the windshield without damaging the carbon, because it only will cut through the glue, and it won't hurt the carbon at all.
Yeah, they're using like some kind of like special soft like nylon or cloth string instead of the normal guitar
Yeah,
string.
yeah, it's not a wire. It's a string, so it's some sort of I don't know what the material is exactly, but it might be like a similar type of line that you would use for fishing.
Yeah.
Not like the plastic line, but like the braided line, because it's super strong and it has really little flex. But yeah, they're gonna pull it out, pop this new one in. That thing has been cracked, I think, since Damon got the car, right?
Yeah, since he got it, like
Yeah.
it was already broken. So
Yeah, it's been a
It's
while.
also had this new windshield for a long time.
Yeah, I know.
And if anything sits
Well-
around long enough, eventually someone's gonna hit it.
well, it was a very it was a very expensive windshield, and I know he was like, well, the crack's not that bad right now, so we might as well ride it out until
Yeah.
you know.
It's gonna get worse. Yeah. Yeah. Apparently, these cars doesn't have a problem with cracking windshields.
Yeah,
So-
apparently they made the windshield like super thin,
Yeah.
and then this car is all solid mounted, so
Yeah, yeah.
Vibration
And also,
and-
it's carbon, so it doesn't flex much, but it does flex a little bit.
oh, so that's what they accounted
So
for,
much torque.
to absorb the vibration.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's got to be like what's causing it
Yeah.
to crack, because there's no mark of where anything like.
No,
hit
it just
the
looks like
windshield.
it cracked like in the middle of the glass.
Yeah,
So that's kind of like,
yeah. That has to be like from some sort of flex or something.
yeah, all stress basically.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, we'll see what it looks like when they get this thing out of here. Yeah, I'm just interested to see what the carbon looks like underneath that glue and stuff. Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Oh yeah, I wonder if it's like really nice, because the rest of the car is like done really nice.
Yeah, I mean, if you look inside the car, you can see the big like
Oh, the
2x2
big weave.
weave, like, or yeah, something big, right? Yeah. And it's not like this carbon here. It's a much thicker weave. So
Gotta be honest with you, I think 4x4 carbon, like large weave in general, I mean, I don't know all the sizes obviously, but like large weave carbon looks really, really good to me.
yeah,
I agree.
For whatever reason, I don't know, like when you see it on a race car, you're like, yeah, it was versus like, you know, as a man who has fake carbon fiber in his car that came from the factory, I didn't put it on there.
The plastic that
If
has.
I was to put carbon on the car, I would see if I could do 4x4 because it just looks really cool to me. That's it. I mean, if you're gonna spend a ton of money, get what looks the best.
Yeah.
That's
But
true.
It looks cool.
yeah, it's pretty wild. Like, there's so many different carbon, and it's, you know, they're using the carbon in the right way to get all the strength out of it, right? So all
this
this
piece
pre-preg
here
carbon-
doesn't need to be like 30 pounds. It's just like the wind's just gonna go right
Yeah,
over
I
top
mean,
of it.
yeah,
It's like pretty
it's
flexible.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, why would you make it like by cast iron? Like something stupid. This is like gonna weigh a ton of weight, right?
Yeah,
Pretty cool.
yeah, it is.
Oh, there it goes. It's coming off.
That's crazy.
It is so flexible. And they all like they had left the wipers in, so they had to like put stuff under it just to keep it from like hitting.
I can smell the interior. that's a weird.
Oh, let's see what's under it. Yeah, that does not match the other carbon.
No.
But you know what?
That's why you never see it. That's why you never see it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just gonna. Let me just go.
Dude, that's a sticker. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's weird. Interesting.
All right, so finally, glass is out.
Nice.
Now we're gonna start preparing the new glass.
Yep.
This is an activator. It's called primer,
Yeah.
right? Sika activator for just glass. Something else for the body, but the body is not scratched. It doesn't need it.
Okay.
So we're applying this primer. It's
So this
like
just helps the glue bond better to the glass?
Yes.
Gotcha, gotcha. And then does this car take a special kind of glue because it's carbon, or is it the same?
It's just the same,
Yeah.
but high quality glue.
Gotcha, cool.
All right, and then now we're ready for the final thing. Glue.
Yep.
We're going.
So since they didn't take the windshield wipers off, I'm gonna help them hold it out of the way. And they're gonna lay it down, so hopefully this goes very smoothly. We got one shot basically.
Ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
So we go first.
Okay, we got it. I'm nervous.
I am too. Right there, right there, right there. This is a Senna windshield. You could go slowly.
Okay.
It's good. Thank you.
Man, that was nerve-wracking.
There is something special about this Senna's,
Yeah.
McLaren's, that it has a guide point right on the middle on both sides, at the bottom,
Oh, really?
on top. So this windshield cannot go wrong. One spot, done.
That makes it easy, especially since there's not many of these windshields and they're quite expensive, right?
Yes. very.
So it's basically done now? Everything's
Basically done.
all
We're
back
finished.
together? Yep. Just finishing it off with a little clean.
Finishing it up, clean up, my dirty hands,
Yeah.
and that's pretty much it.
Yep. So I know that this windshield has like a bunch of sensors and I guess like cameras and stuff on it. Does anything need to be calibrated once you put it back, or does it just
No.
kind of figure it out itself?
Every time that we do a glass, you do,
Yeah.
but because we work with a lot of shops that do like collision shop, like any structural repair.
Yeah.
If in case that this car has to move to, let's say, to a spray booth or service mechanic, and you have to turn the key on,
Yep.
then you do.
Oh,
Because
okay.
basically you turn the switch on.
Oh,
This
so
one
if it's-
particularly,
Yeah.
we don't, because the car, we never stutter, so disconnect, connect, and that's it. You're
Okay.
good to go.
Cool. So since it was off, it's all good. It's already
Yes,
like
that's it.
set. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
All right, guys, so today we have a lot going on, all for the F12. So we've got to pull the engine out, which means we have to take everything back off, get it out of the car, pull the transmission, the bell housing, and then get the engine into the back of the truck. We've got to head over to CP and pick up the new pistons that we had made because, well, in case you don't know, I'll explain it on the way over there. But anyway, we have to get new pistons and the block over to D-Sport and then get all the stuff to them so they can crank this thing out and get it done as soon as possible so we can get this thing running. The last thing that I needed to do today, before we pull the engine out, was make these exhaust brackets. So I actually ordered material and it just came in, so I got some stainless. I drew this up yesterday, just got the stainless, cut it out real quick, fit it in the car, and it is looking pretty good. So the idea here is basically to support all of that X-pipe, because right now we've got the turbos that are hard mounted to the car, and the exhaust here basically floats. So we've got the headers that go into the X-pipe and the wastegates, and all of this weight kind of hanging off the front, so we need some supports there. So this seemed like the best way to do it. This is going to brace everything from underneath. These are like silicone mounts, so they're very high temp, so they're not going to melt. It's not like a regular rubber. But yeah, that's the idea. So I'm going to tack these things up, and then we'll pull everything off of the car. We've got obviously a lot of lines and stuff that we made, so I have to take all those things off the car as well. But now that we'll have all those lines off the car, we'll be able to clean all that stuff, put them in bags, and just have them ready for when the engine comes back. Because the idea is when that engine comes back in, it's a thrash. Assemble everything. The wiring guy is going to come down, work his magic, and then finish up the final bits of plumbing. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff we have to do the chassis in between there. But I'll tell you guys about that a little more. Right now, I'm going to tack these things up so we can get this engine out of the car and get this thing, yeah, just keep moving forward with this big project. So we got all the lines off now. Now we're going to take off the, well, they would be called down pipes, but they are up pipes since they are going through the hood. So we'll get those guys off, and then we'll pull the turbos off. So we just got to take the clamp off here, and then we've got 2 bolts over here on this bracket that hold them in place. And then we can just lift the whole turbo out of the way, and that makes it way easier than trying to get the X pipe out with the turbo still in place, because X pipe is pretty big and goes all the way from one side of the engine compartment to the other. But once you get those turbos off, the X pipe actually comes out really easily. All right, the engine is out, transmission is off. Tim is just pulling off the factory part of the engine mount, because the guys at the machine shop don't need that. So pull those last things off, gather up some other bits and pieces that are still here. We got most of the stuff over to them already, the cams, the lifters, all the cam caps. I think almost every single piece for the engine, except for the oil pump, which I still have to rebuild. I'm going to do that, so I will take care of that and then bring it over to them in a couple days. And looking at the cart over here, this is all F12 stuff, but there's not a whole lot left. So a couple things, like this is a oil pump heat shield. I think this might be a starter heat shield. The coils, a starter, some pulleys, some factory spark plugs, old gaskets and stuff. And then up here, the factory alternator for the F12. And this is the alternator that I'm going to try to fit onto the car. So this is a Bosch race alternator, and as you can see, it is quite a bit smaller, so it takes less drag to spin it up and spin it down, so the engine can actually rev up faster and come down in revs quicker, so you have a lot more control. Plus it just makes everything sound even snappier. Lighter flywheel, less drag on all the accessories, because now there's nothing except for the alternator. So it's the only thing we're gonna have driven off the front of the engine is the alternator. So we've also got the stock front pulley that has 2 belts on it, basically. So we've got one for the AC, and something else, maybe it was the power steering, and then the alternator. I think that was it. But yeah, so we can probably cut this down and make it a little narrower, but I won't do that right now. I wanna make sure I can mount the alternator first. And that's something that I did want to do before we sent the engine off, but we don't have a crankshaft in the car, so I can't mount the pulley, which means I can't get the dimensions from the pulley to the front of the block to make sure that the alternator is in the right position as far as depth goes. So if it's off by 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters or anything like that, it'll just spit belts, because the belt is going to be crooked the entire time that the engine is running, and the fast revs and decels will just cause the belt to slip off. So that won't be good. So we just have to wait until we get it back. But luckily, since we have the CAD software and the plasma table, we can actually make some brackets pretty quickly. I still might have to do some machining, but we do have a mill. And if I have to make some spacers with a lathe, then I'll just have to run over to my shop and do that. But either way, not a big deal. Probably get that. That'll probably take 6 or 8 hours, maybe a little less, depending. But anyway, let's get that engine over to the machine shop. Well, we got the engine loaded up and the few parts that we needed to grab. My seatbelt on since we're leaving the block.
Yep. And we're leaving the safety of the block.
The safety of the block. So we have to.
Oh, two stops, right?
Pick up the pistons.
Okay.
And then go to D-Sport.
Oh.
But first, Tim.
Yep.
First. It's the most important meal of the day.
Food. Lunch.
So we're gonna be right by CP and actually right down through Sparko too.
Yeah.
We go over to that what's that, Farmer Boys?
Oh yeah, that's a good spot.
That's good, right?
Yep.
All right, let's do that. Something different because over here.
It's always the same, you know.
Just,
there's not much around, so
Yeah.
it's like
Very
here's the
limited.
3 options that we have.
Yeah, unless we want to take an hour and a half lunch, which honestly, most of the time we order something and we don't even leave our area in the shop.
Yeah.
I'll sit at my desk and maybe watch a 15-minute video and chow,
Yep.
and then we're back to work.
Yeah, we got a lot of things to accomplish in the next month.
Yep. Lots and lots of things.
This
so.
doesn't help, you know.
Yeah. He's doing all right though. He's doing better than a lot of these dudes.
Yeah, there's been a few dudes that a cool 5 minutes will go by and
Yeah,
it's
and then they'll try, they don't get it, they pull forward again, and then they try again, but they don't let you, they don't wave you by, they just block the whole street until they get it. So you just sit there for 5 minutes
they need to
watching.
focus. They're locked in. First stop. Well, second stop.
That's right, because lunch, you can't forget about lunch.
Yeah.
Well, we got the pistons. We got
Brand new.
the second set of brand new pistons.
Slightly larger.
Slightly larger. So yeah, basically, if you guys remember, the coatings inside of the cylinders on the Ferrari is about 1/4 of a millimeter thick, but a little thicker than that, 0.28 or 0.30 or something like that. So basically, when they were machining the coating off, which we didn't even know it had a coating, there was a little bit of coating left, and that was going to be an issue, quite possibly. So we didn't want to take that chance of having that ultra hard coating that is super thin start to flake off and get into the oil, and then get into the bearings, which would just kind of destroy the engine really quickly. So new set of pistons. We're going to head over to D-Sport now and give the guys the stuff, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks they can get all this stuff done. We can pick up the engine, put it back in the car, get the wiring done, all that stuff. So let's get over to D-Sport. All right, we are back at D-Sport. We got the engine off the back of the truck. We got it on the engine stand. We got the pistons down there. We got a bunch of parts in here, some cam timing stuff, and basically all the rest of the bits and pieces that are for this engine. So we know we have everything over here, except maybe a couple bolts that I can always bring by. And like I said, the oil pump, which I'm going to rebuild. So I'll show you guys that process because it's pretty interesting. It's a multi-stage pump since it's a dry sump system. And the way that it's built in, it's all obviously just like a complete unit that bolts onto the side of the block. It's factory, so everything fits seamlessly. Yeah, that's about it over here. They're just going to have to get cranking to get this thing ready. We also, when we popped in here, we noticed they have a few new pets over here. We got some bunnies.
This is the most interesting machine shop I've been in.
Yeah, it's rad. It's like, right by the mill over here. We got the bunnies on patrol, making sure everything gets done right. And yeah, but other than that, I think we're good to go. It's all back here, and now it's in the hands of the boys at D-Sport.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That's like right behind your house, basically, right?
Yeah, probably about 75 or 100 miles away, but yeah, like in that direction.
Oh, I thought it was closer. Is that far away?
No, because it's way over on the other side of the hill over there.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought it was like
No,
10, 15 miles away.
Yeah,
like,
no, a few years ago,
Yeah.
maybe, well, not a few, maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a really big fire. Yeah, 10 miles away from my house, and we got evacuated. So that was pretty wild. But this is a massive fire, and then you got one up by your house too, right?
Yeah, that one's also pretty far. I would say like minimum 15 to 20 miles, but
Yeah.
like freeway miles.
Yeah.
Not really close at all.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that the fire is so big, and there's so much heat coming from the fire
Yeah.
that it's actually creating clouds.
Yeah, it's making its own weather system.
Yeah, it's wild. And then it was raining the other day by your house because of that fire.
Yeah, it created like a low pressure zone under it, and then it was like thunder, lightning, rain.
Yeah, pretty crazy, man. Fire season in SoCal. It's always wild.
Yeah, it doesn't happen every year. It used to seem like that, but the last couple of years it was raining a ton and nothing happened. And I think now all that vegetation that grew because of the rain is
Yeah.
now
It's
dead.
all dried up, and tinder basically just instantly starts and catches on fire so easily.
Yep.
That's pretty crazy.
Well, we're on our we had another stop that I kind of forgot and didn't know about.
Yep. We reminded ourselves when we drove past here. We're like, oh yeah, the wheels for Dave's Bentley are sitting at Nick's shop, and I don't know if you guys have seen Nick's shop, but it's pretty small, not a lot of room in there. So Nick's like, guys, can you please come get these wheels?
Yeah, he's been quite adamant about it for a while, and we're like, we're a little busy.
Yeah,
and we
it's
also
like,
we also didn't know.
yeah, we didn't know until like last week. But yeah, it's also kind of far, like driving down here, all the way down here, an hour away just to pick up the wheels, just so we can put them in our shop and stack them in a pile for
Yeah,
later.
exactly.
Not super motivated, but we're here. So Nick, we're coming to see you, and we're gonna grab those wheels so you don't have to worry about them anymore. All right, well, Nick isn't here, but shop's open, so we just grabbed these wheels, and maybe we'll mess with him. I'll call him up and say, hey Nick, can I come by and pick up the wheels? They're ready to go? And he's gonna be like, where are they? I don't know what happened to them. Nah, we'll tell him the truth. But,
Okay.
all right, back to the shop. Let's go. So as you guys can tell, we made it back to HQ. We're still on the F12, so we've got all those parts dropped off, but I need to order some more parts, and the transmission has obviously been connected to the engine for a while, so I couldn't get these numbers that I had written down here before with the clutch depth with the flywheel installed. And just to make sure to get the right bearing, I'm going to measure it again. But so far I wrote down that I've got 100 millimeters spacing with no gap. So basically where the clutch sits and the flywheel, between the back of the bell housing here and the face of the clutch, I've got 100 millimeters that I need to fill up with a bearing, minus about 3 millimeters to give us a little bit of a gap for clutch wear. Otherwise, if the release bearing is constantly pushing on the fingers of the pressure plate, actually let's go over and look at the clutch so I can explain it a little better. All right, so I tightened down all the bolts. So basically the clutch is now completely clamped down onto the flywheel, and that's important because these fingers here in the diaphragm on the pressure plate will be up, and then as you bolt it down, the inside here, it's on a fulcrum basically. So as the clutch disc gets pressed down tighter, the fingers will move, and then when you push the fingers in with the release bearing, when you push your clutch in, this bearing pushes these down and it releases the load. So basically releases the load on the clutch plates to allow it to slip, so you can put the car in neutral and shift gears. So I need to measure the height of this, where the bearing sits. So I've got about 8 millimeters there. And then I also need to measure the total height here. So yeah, I've got about 76 millimeters there. So measuring all of that and knowing that the timing gear, the center of the timing gear sits 20 millimeters into the engine. Actually, just to double check that, I took a picture before I sent the engine off, so I knew I would get it right. And here we go. So I've got to the center of that, we've got 20 millimeters. So I can just subtract 20 millimeters off of that, knowing that that goes onto the engine side, and figured it out. And it looks like my measurement was correct, but I just want to double check. I want to order a bearing and just have it sitting here on the shelf and think that it's the right one. We go to put the car together and it's not the right one. That would be good. But yeah, so now I need to find a tilt and release bearing that is 97-ish millimeters depth. So I'm gonna go over to my computer and go to the Tilton website and see what kind of bearings they have. Also, I need to look at the diameter of the bolts to make sure it's gonna fit on our bell housing, because the middle, about 90 millimeters of it is cut out. And I don't want the bearing to be connected to the transmission. We'll walk back over here. So we've got this hole here, and either way, we could have a bell housing that's almost completely cut out in the middle, and the bearing would connect to the transmission then. But the real issue is that if you want to service the transmission and not have to touch the clutch. Clutch is fine, release bearing is fine, but you just want to service the transmission and pull it off. Well, we've only got 4 bolts here, and we can pull the transmission off of the bell housing really, really easily in the car, except if the bearing was mounted to the transmission instead of to the bell housing, then we'd have to take the whole assembly off, which means either we need quick release fittings, dry brake fittings on the clutch lines, and we'd have to disassemble all that. Obviously it's like 8 or 9 bolts that go all the way around, starter has to come off, all that stuff. Or we just take the 4 bolts off, then the release bearing and everything in the clutch all stays on the engine. So that's why we want to mount it to this plate here. So these 2 holes were just here when Gary, who made that plate for us, when he machined it to try to line everything up, he had a couple holes in there so you could bolt the plate to it and kind of get everything to adjust properly. So we're not going to use those holes, but I do need to make sure that the bearing sits outside of that range. So we can't have something where the bolts go in there, because that wouldn't work. Then we'd have to make an adapter plate that brings it in, also takes up some room. So to try to simplify everything, I'm just going to try to find a bearing that has a bigger bolt circle, and then I can just drill 3, 4 holes, whatever the mounting bolts are, and mount it directly to the belts. So that's going to be the easiest thing to do. Well, we've got quite a few bearings to choose from. So Tilton has stuff for a ton of applications. Like we've got stuff for Hondas down here. We've got Corvette, Mustang, and some Universal stuff. We even have stuff for a Saab 900 and a Saab 9000, which is pretty crazy that there's enough Saabs running Tilton stuff to have actually their own unique bearing. Very interesting. But looking at the options here, it looks like either the 2000 series or the 4000 series are going to be the ones that we want. This 5000 series looks similar, but this is actually for a Tilton bell housing, so you'd have to run their bell housing, or we could make it work, but the other ones are more of a universal style, so I'm guessing that there's going to be more leg height options. And I will start over here. So let's see what our overall height is. Oh yeah, so they have something that goes all the way up to 96.5 millimeters. So with our 100 millimeter gap, that gives me 3.5 millimeters, and that's actually pretty much spot on. So that might be the one that we go with. They also have one that's 94 millimeters, 91 millimeters. So there's some room there. If we do need to adjust anything, we could just put the bearing into the lathe and machine the feet down slightly to get the height a little bit farther, or if we need to shim it, we can make a plate that goes behind it to shim it up. But I also need to check to make sure that the bearing size is the right size. So Tilton has like a 5.5 inch, like a really small button clutch that you would run in a road race style car, and then they have the bigger one, the 7.25, that you would run in something that requires like a lot more clamping power and also a lot more heat control, like when you're drifting or other stuff like that, where you're going to slip the clutch a bit, you're going to be on and off the clutch quite a bit throughout the run. It's not like a road race car where you just have the clutch in for that split second while you do a shift and then it's engaged. When you're drifting, you're kind of on the clutch a lot, on and off, and even slipping the clutch a little bit to get the wheel speed to ramp up without just dropping the clutch, like that snap. So these are designed for that, but we got to make sure we get it right. And we've got the bearings available for a 38 millimeter and a 44 millimeter contact diameter. So we need the one for a 44 millimeter contact diameter. And this looks like it's going to meet all of our needs. So I am going to find that part number, and I will order that from Tilton for about $445 for that bearing. It's expensive, but that's racing. Things are pricey, and it is what it is, and we'll probably order a spare too just to have it. This is the same clutch style that I ran in my drift car that made about 1,100 horsepower to the wheels, so not nearly as much as the F12, but you know what? I think it's gonna hold. It held really, really well in my car, and we had that thing gripped up like crazy. We would run the tire pressure between 8 to 12 pounds. So a 295/40 between 8 and 12 pounds, like full on drag race style, but we're still sliding the car sideways, like an insane amount of grip. We would actually get the wheel to rotate inside of the tire. So there was so much grip on the tire that the wheel would spin and you would get like rubber buildup on the side. So we had to tell the guys that were mounting the tires, don't use any lube, put it on dry so it can just grip as best as it can. And most of the time it worked out. Release bearing has been ordered, so that'll be here in about a week and a half, hopefully sooner, but the good thing is that we won't need it until then. So we're gonna continue working on the chassis now, and I wanna make sure that we finish up everything in the engine compartment. There's two more things that we really need to do. One is pretty big, and that's to move the steering rack. So that's gonna require us cutting the back half of this mount off and grinding everything down here and making it basically all smooth. And then I'm gonna leave that forward hole there so I can make a plate with 3 holes in it. 2 holes are gonna be the steering rack width, and the other hole is gonna be the distance that we need to move it back, which I think was 30 millimeters. So we're gonna make those plates, and I'll probably weld a tube across it to keep it square so they don't move around. And then I can kind of design and build the mounts off of that. So basically like make a little jig to hold everything in place. But that's a pretty big project. Not something that I really want to start right now because it's almost 5 o'clock. It's about 4:30. That's for tomorrow. So today, the other thing we need to do is just kind of small stuff. We need to put some nut certs in here, which were the points where the exhaust mounts were. So Tim, I'll have you work on that for me, and I'll go and weld up the exhaust just so that's all done. But yeah, we'll put some bolts in there. I think probably 6 millimeter, but let's check the hole diameter inside these mounts. 6 mil is probably strong enough, or definitely strong enough, but I don't want it to wobble around a ton. And it's an 8 millimeter. So we're gonna go with the big boys, and we're just gonna put some 8 mils in there just so we have the right bolt hole size. Because if we put a 6 mil in there, it's a bit sloppy. We'd probably have to stack a washer on top, and you guys know me, I like things to be done right. So we'll put some 8 mils in there, get that done, and then we'll probably actually end up pulling all the front suspension off again anyway. We put it back on there, mocked it all up again, everything looks good, but we want to pull everything off of the front of the car after we get that fab work done and paint all of this. So now that we're getting ready to almost near assembly time, almost all the fab work is done. So we can clean up anything, go over little bits like this where we've got some glue and some sharp edges, sand them down, maybe grind barrel sand it or whatever. Just really go over everything and even cut off these studs. So there's a lot of these studs on the car that are for plastic nuts, which we're really not going to use on this car. And honestly, there's probably not going to be anything over there in that spot. So we'll cut these off and then sand them all down to make it smooth for a couple reasons. One, so it looks better, but 2, when you have things like that just sticking out and you go in and work on the car, especially something that's designed to be worked on constantly, like a race car is, that is just a point where you're gonna scratch your arm or your hand or whatever it might be. So trying to eliminate all of those things, things like when you zip tie stuff, using flush cuts to cut the end of the zip tie off so there's no sharp edges. That's one of my pet peeves. When you reach your hand into an engine compartment, you're trying to grab something, you pull your arm out, and you just get a slice because of a sharp zip tie, because somebody went in with a regular pair of snips and cut it at an angle and made this nice little triangular, jagged point on it. Can't stand that. Guys, please don't do that. Get some flush cuts. They're cheap. Believe me, it's going to be like so much better to work on a car if you use flush cuts. So while Tim is drilling those pilot holes, I'm gonna grab the nut cert that we're gonna use and measure it to see what size the final drill bit is. We actually use a bunch of drill bits going up in size and steps. That really helps to keep the hole centered. If you just do like an 1/8 inch pilot hole and then go with like a 10 millimeter drill bit or 3/8 drill bit or whatever, it's going to walk around a lot. The drill bit's going to kind of like jump around in the hole, and you're going to see it kind of cuts almost like in a triangular shape, and doesn't make a round hole and doesn't keep it centered. So we're going to grab the, let's see what we got here, 8x125 nutserts and measure these things to see what our final size is, and then pick like 4 or 5 or 6 drill bits depending on what we started with, what the hole was, and how high up in size we're going to go. All right, so we need a drill bit that is about 13.3 millimeters to finish the hole off. And let's see if we have a drill bit that is that big, because I think our drill bit sizes end at a 1/2 inch over here. Get my Harbor Freight drill bit set out. It's cheap, but they actually work really well. But yeah, 1/2 inch is as big as we have. I did buy another drill bit, and I think it might have been for 17/32. Let's see what size this thing is. All right, so that's it right there. That's the drill bit that we need. And yeah, I bought this drill bit last time when we had to do an 8x125 nutsert. So that's the final size. Let's see if that'll fit in the drill.
No, there was something wrong with this. I forgot.
No, so we had to use my drill that I brought from my shop, right?
The big one.
The plug-in drill, the big boy. Because I think that's got a 1/2 inch chuck, so it won't do anything bigger than a 1/2 inch. But it is a small little Milwaukee, so I'm not mad at it.
I mean, I think it has the power to do it. It just doesn't have the right.
Yeah, it's definitely got enough power to do it. The chuck's just a little too small, but this thing is kind of like the universal, real handy drill, fits in most places. And then we have a size that's a step down from this, like the 90-degree one that we use occasionally when we have a very hard to reach area. But yeah, Tim's gonna grab the big boy, the one that I use for notching tubes. That guy's been with me for many years, Tim.
I'm a little spoiled by the cordless because now you have to get cords.
You gotta
and
get
all
an
this.
extension cord. Like I said, that's old school right there. I've notched a lot of tubes with that guy. I honestly think I've had that drill for probably, I'm gonna feel pretty old here, but at least 15 years, maybe 20 years. It's been a long time. That drill bit sounds terrible.
Yeah, maybe it's.
Look at it though, like that drill bit's so dull, it's like bouncing on the aluminum. Yeah, we need a sharper drill bit.
Well, that's there goes the.
Was that a quarter-inch? Yeah, we use a quarter probably fairly often because a 1/4 inch is like just the right size for a 6 millimeter bolt. It's just oversized. We probably used it through some of the plasma cut stuff where when it cuts it with a plasma, it gets like this super hardened hole basically because you're heating the metal up in that point. So you get less like heat treating on there. And then you go to drill it out with a drill and it just wrecks the drill bits. But good thing drill bits are not too expensive. That's why we use those like the little kind of, cheapo pack of drill bits for random stuff. And then we keep the precision Harbor Freight set over here, which, it's actually pretty good for being from Harbor Freight.
It's actually really good.
Yeah, I was really surprised. I thought it was going to be garbage, but it's good. And so we keep these guys nice and sharp because these ones have all the different sizes, so you can really get it, dead on precise rather than just going, yeah, close enough. We don't want to do that. Look at that. Perfect. Fits the first time, just as it should.
Man, those M8s, they're really hard to squish. Like, even with the tool, I was like, is it down yet? Like, it was hard to, like, get it to squish.
Yeah, I mean, like we said before, anything over, like, 6 millimeters is pretty wild.
Yeah, I was, like, thinking the whole time if I had to do it by hand, because I was worried about these two down here, like, if the thing was going to fit.
Oh, yeah, because of the angle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was, thinking the whole time if I had to do that by hand, that would be such a pain.
Yeah, I was thinking at first, I was like, oh, I can turn it like that, but then I was thinking, yeah, that's not gonna work. So I gotta run them in the center, but yeah, I scrapped the line and marked them that way just to make sure we had enough room, because they are pretty long too.
Yeah.
Going pretty deep. But that looks really good. So that part's done. Now we are done here. We're gonna do some cleanup. I don't think you guys wanna sit here and watch us vacuum and sweep. So we're gonna let you guys go, and we'll be back tomorrow, the day after, with a whole lot more updates. We gotta pull this subframe out of here too. Chop these guys off and cap those things because those are going nowhere now. They used to kind of do like this X-brace underneath, and it fit with the stock bell housing, but it doesn't fit with our new sequential transmission. But also, we don't really need it because the front of this car was built for a lot of load with really wide, sticky tires. So trying to get the chassis really stiff and make it handle really well. Well, it is a really stiff chassis already, but we don't need that little extra bracing because we're not going to run a massive grippy front tire on this thing. We're going to run probably a 255 or a 265. And on a drift car, we actually don't want a ton of front grip. We want it to be able to slide a little bit in the front end also. And that, I'm not talking about like chassis flex and weird stuff like that, but we're not going to run like a race tire in the front. It's going to be a regular 200 treadwear street tire, and that's not going to put a ton of load on it. Also, the tires are going to be facing the direction that we're going, so they load in a completely different way than you would if you're going around a corner and you're turning in, and or a high-speed corner, you're going through bumps and all that. So that's why we're able to chop those things off. But still quite a few things to do, and I'm sure there's a lot of things that I'm not even thinking about. So we'll see you guys next time, and continue on this crazy journey with us where we near the completion of the F12. So see you guys soon.
Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use code DAILYDRIVEN or scan the QR code on screen to get your free Fume topper when you order your journey pack today.